It's your open source advocate, and I'm back with another video, and today I'm going to talk about Guacamole. Now, you might love Guacamole, you might hate Guacamole, but I'm going to tell you right now that the Guacamole RDP is an incredibly powerful system for accessing machines remotely through your web browser. So if you've ever had to do a remote desktop session to get back to a machine that you use on the regular, you know that it's great, but if you have to do it from a machine that you're not usually at, it can be a little bit of a pain, a little bit of a hassle sometimes. This right here can make that so much easier for you. If you have a lot of machines that you support on a regular basis, maybe you're the IT person, maybe you're the professional in the office that takes care of everything, and you need to have access at any moment. There are different tools for different things, but Guacamole will absolutely give you everything that you need for doing remote service. Now that doesn't mean like, hey, somebody calls me on the phone and says I need you to get connected so I can do this, and then you have to send them a code or they send you a code or anything like that. You really just have direct access all the time. Now it has a users and group system. You have permissions about who can get to what groups can access what groups of machines, what groups of people can access what machines and individual machines, how they can access it and everything else. So it's got a ton of power built into it and it's really cool. I want to show you how to get it set up and running. Really, this just runs a server, and then you tell that server, hey, here's an RDP session I want you to connect to, and then that server lets you do that through the web browser, which is really awesome. The other part that I want to show you is, while Guacamole has a built-in user management system, so you can set up your logins, you can set up your users, and you can do a lot of things with it, it also has the ability to use LDAP. It has the ability to use OpenID Connect, OAuth. And it has the ability to have TOTP built with the built-in system if you want to, some things like that. So I'm going to go through how to set up the OIDC part of it, the OpenID Connect, to log in that way as well. So we'll go through a few things. We're going to get it set up. We're going to get it running. I'm going to show you some real quick security things about it. And then we'll add a couple of connections to it. And then we'll set up the OIDC so that we can log in as a user using your OAuth OIDC system as well. So we're going to get into all of that right after this. I want to say thank you to all of my subscribers and all of my patrons over at Patreon. Seriously, you guys make this so worth it for me to do these videos every week. I really truly enjoy it, and I just can't say thank you enough. If you're enjoying these videos, subscribe. Let YouTube know that I'm doing a good job by subscribing to the channel. Plus, you'll get notified when I have new videos coming out. And finally, if you're enjoying what I'm doing, give it a like, just click on that thumbs up, and that way YouTube knows that you like it, and they'll pass it along to other people that might enjoy my content as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you again. Let's get started. So one of the things you're going to need is Docker installed on the host that you want to set this up on, because I love to use Docker. It lets me run a lot of different services on the same host without having to worry about certain dependencies being there, getting mixed up with other dependencies, things like that. Makes it really easy to get it up and running, and I'm going to show you that in just a minute. But you do want to have Docker, and in this case Docker Compose installed, and then Nginx Proxy Manager is a bonus. You don't have to do that, but if you want to access this from outside of your network and actually get to your Guacamole instance from outside of your network, then that's going to be another one that you'll really want to have set up as well. You can use any reverse proxy. You don't have to use Nginx Proxy Manager, but that's the one that I use, so that's the one I'll be using for the demos today. So first thing we're going to do is create our structure. And what we want to have is a parent Docker folder. So if I do an ls, you can see that I've already got that Docker folder here. And if I do ls docker, you'll see that inside of that I've got a few different things. So I've got headscale, I've got Glippy, which I haven't done yet, Open Project, a few of these things, but no Guacamole there. So what I want to do is from this low level folder below Docker, I want to create a folder called Guacamole inside of Docker. But if I don't have Docker already, I can still do that with one command. So I'm going to do mkdir-p docker/Guacamole. And what this says is check to see if the Docker folder exists. If it does, use it. If it doesn't, create it. So it's going to use the Docker folder that exists. Then it says check to see if this one exists, and it does the same thing. It says if it does, use it. If not, create it. So when we hit enter, it's going to create that, and now I can cd into docker/Guacamole, and we're there, and there's nothing in it yet. So we're going to create a Docker Compose file, nano docker-compose.yml. Now I use the nano editor. You can use Vi, Vim, Emacs, whatever makes you happy. Feel free to use that, but nano is simple. It's built into most systems, so I just use that one. I'm going to copy and paste this file right here. So I'm going to do a copy, and I'm just going to paste it in right here. And I've got some comments in here for you just so you know what's going on, and you can kind of remove these if you don't want them. I'll move it back over here a little bit, in fact. I probably don't need that much space on the file either. So basically it says you can change the left side of this port mapping if your port 8080 is already in use. And a lot of times it is, so just be aware that it's probably good to go ahead and change that left side if 8080 is the port that it says, or 80 or 443. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and change it, and I'm going to change this to 8988, and we'll have that mapped. So that's the host port, which is like on the host machine that's running Docker, I'll access Guacamole through that port. 8080 is the port that's inside the container that I don't want to change. So you don't want to change this right side. Up above that, we've got a volume mapping that's happening here, and this says /Postgres. So that means in the folder where I've got this Docker Compose file, create a folder called Postgres, and then map that to the container where it's /config. So this is the way we want to do this. You can set this up to map to anywhere you want on the left side on your host system, but on the right side, again, don't mess with these unless you know what you're doing, you're a developer and you're changing it on purpose. But on the left side, you can map this to whatever you want. I just made it Postgres because it was easy. It may have been like that in the sample file even, so just left it that way. It'll restart unless it's stopped, which means unless I do Docker Compose down, if the server restarts, if the host machine restarts, if anything happens, if it crashes inside the container, it will restart it for me. So that means unless I stop it, it'll restart it. But if I stop it on purpose, none of that stuff will make it restart. So I can tell it to stop and it won't restart on its own. So that helps. So once you've got this, we're just going to Control O to save and Control X to exit. And we've got our Docker Compose file now, which is great. We can actually start running this thing and get it up and running and ready to go pretty quickly. So we're just going to do Docker space compose up-d. Now that tells the system, use Docker Compose to pull down the image that we specified inside this compose file, bring it up and run it in the background. So detached, daemon, people like to say it means different things. I think it means detached, but it's going to run as a daemon in the background. So we're going to do 2 ampersands, and then we're going to do another command, which is Docker space compose logs-f. So in this case, we're saying, hey, once you get this pulled down and bring it up and running, show me the logs, and I want to follow the logs. That's what the F is for, which means like show me as they're coming in what changes. So I'm going to hit go. Just press enter. It'll start doing its thing. It's going to go pull down this thing, and it's got 28 layers to it for this particular container, but it's got everything built into the one image, which is great. Makes it really easy. Nothing for us to go and make, major changes for. So it's pulled it down and it's creating our Docker, our Guacamole container now. It started, and it's going to start logging out all of the information for us. So it's going to show us that it's getting everything created. And you'll usually see this kind of stuff scrolling up. What we're really looking for is anything that looks like an error message. So if we see anything that doesn't say info, like here we've got warn. So it says Jersey server something, waddle feature. So something gave us a warning. Warnings usually aren't like, hey, everything has to stop. It's just like, hey, you should know this. But it says features disabled. That's fine. But here we've got everything else set. It says info. That's great. We're just going to do Control C to get out of those logs, and we'll clear out the terminal there. And now we're going to go in our browser, and we're actually just going to go out and go to that IP address of that server. So I'm going to go to 192.168.10.84, and I made that 8988 for the port, so I just put a colon and then the port number. I'm going to hit enter, and if everything's running, we should get this, which is the Guacamole login. So this thing says, hey, here's Apache Guacamole. Now when we first run it, we have to put in a special login, and it's GUACADMIN. And then it's the same thing for the password, GUACADMIN, and we're just going to hit login. We don't want to save that one, but you'll see you get logged in. There's really not much here because we don't have any connections set up yet. So what you do is you go over here to the right side, click, and you're going to go to settings. The first thing we want to do for security purposes, and I'm going to scroll this up to zoom it up a little bit for you guys. This top menu here in the settings is where you can kind of do everything. So you can add users. You can create groups of machines and groups of users. You can create connections and connection groups here. And then you've got basically your preferences for this setup. So this is already detected. I'm America, Chicago. I could set it to English, but it's just going to default to English for me anyways. I can change the current password or set up a new password if I want to. And then we can update the password right there. The default input method. So right now it's set to none, but there's text input, which means like, hey, allow typing of text and enable the keyboard events based on the typed text. This is a necessary setting if you're going to be using a touch device as your input device. So something like an iPad or something like that. On-screen keyboard, if you want to use that in a Linux or iOS type system or Android system, you may want to set that up so you can set Control-Alt-Delete, things like that. And it says default mouse emulation. How do you want that to work? What do you want it to look like? So you can pick, does it look like this or does it look like this? It's completely up to you how you do that as well. But you've got a few options there under the preferences. But under the users, the first thing we want to do is actually go here, and we could click on WalkAdmin here real quick. You'll notice you cannot change this username. For me, that's not great because somebody knows, well, that's the default thing that you get for Guacamole, so I'm just going to start trying every password I can possibly try to get logged in as your admin. So we don't want to keep this account. So we're going to go back to our users here, and we're just going to say create a new user. So first thing out of the gate, we're going to create a new user. So I'm going to give myself a username here, and I'm going to give myself a long, strong password, and repeat it. There we go. And then I'll put in my name, that's fine, and email address, and my organization, and finally my role is admin. There we go. And we can move down and kind of check off any of the things that we want for account restrictions, things like that. Is login disabled? So is this somebody who did work for you and now they're not working for you and they're going to disable their login until you have time to go back and adjust things or make sure certain machines are moved over to the right people, stuff like that? You can do that. Password expired. Do I need them to reset their password? Do I want the password to auto expire? So on and so forth. What's their user's time zone? Maybe they don't live in the same state as me or the same part of the world. I can set their time zone as well. Can I administer the system? Yes. Can I create new users? Yes. Can I create new user groups? Yes. Can I create new connections, new connection groups? Sharing profiles and change my own password. Absolutely can do all of those things. And if I had any connections, I could go through here and pick what connections I have access to as well. So I've set up myself as a super admin. Let me get that one checked, and I'm going to save. So now I am created as a user, and it's got everything filled out. So the next thing I want to do is I want to actually go log out as the Guacadmin, and I'm going to log in as myself. And log in. There we go. And I'm going to go back over here to the settings, and I'm going to go back to my users, and I'm going to open up the WalkAdmin here, Guacadmin, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to go down to the bottom. You'll see I've got this little delete button. So if you're logged in as the person, you can't delete yourself while you're logged in. So you have to create a new user, then delete the other user. And now I am the only admin on this system, and I can go and add more users and groups and things like that if I want to. So before we move on too far, I want to show you how to set up these connections, and we're going to get into kind of getting everything ready and going for the connection setup next. When we get a connection set up, we're just going to go to the Connections tab here in the settings. We're going to click on a new connection, and we'll give it a name. So I'm just going to call this Win10. And the root just tells you the location. It's not talking about like the user that's root, but it's actually just a location in your folder structure that you may have created if you've created groups. I haven't, so there's not any. I'm going to change this to RDP, and I'm going to scroll down a little bit here, and we want to get to this hostname section. We don't need the proxy, actually. We need this section below that where it's parameters for network. So I'm going to give this the IP address of the system and the port number for the port number for RDP there, and then authentication. So we want to make sure we've got the right authentication method, and we'll get that typed in here. We don't have a domain that we need to use in this case, and the security mode we're going to use any, and then we're going to say ignore the server certificate in this case. Whoops, there we go. Get it checked, and we'll go on down. There's a few other things you can set, but you don't have to set. So as you come down, keyboard layout is an option. You've got some other things there. If the time zone is different from your server for where the client is that you're connecting to, you might want to set that. As we go down, we've got the width and the height. We don't need to set that. So for Windows, anything after 8, I think, supports this kind of dynamic resizing, which is pretty nice. Color depth, we can do true color 32-bit. And as we go down, you've got a bunch of other options for things you can set as far as like programs you want to start, different capabilities you want to have. Like, do you want to see the wallpaper, the theming? It goes a lot faster if you don't set those things, but you can absolutely set those. So we'll set wallpaper, theming, true color 32-bit. I don't know how good it's going to look, but we can say window dragging, all this kind of stuff if we want to. And then we'll go down here to the bottom and just click on save to get that added. And you can see now we've got a machine here. Now if we click here, it's just going to go back into the edit mode for that machine. It's not going to take us to the actual connection. So we'll go down here and we'll just click cancel. We don't need to edit that. What we got to do is we got to go back over here. Now we got to click on home and you'll see that machine show up. And as you build out your folder structure, you'll see the machine showing up in your folders, of course. And we'll click on that. And if we've got everything set up correctly, it should get connected here and show us that desktop. All right, we're going to do this again. I just realized I didn't have my network connection set correctly. We should be able to log in here. We're going to get everything going. There we go. Windows comes up. It logs in my user, and I've even got a Nextcloud update, so I can click through that on that remote machine. And you can see I'm still running everything in my browser. I can switch between browser tabs to see what's going on pretty easily. I can go ahead and tell this, yep, go ahead and install. And it's going to do its thing here. So, Nextcloud is going to do its update. But I'm logged into a remote machine, and I'm using Guacamole to do that. So it makes it really quick and really simple to get into this actual remote desktop session. Now if I click back, you'll see that I've got one down here at the bottom, and if I had more, I could open that up and actually start connecting to others, and it would just kind of build out here at the bottom where I can switch back and forth very quickly back to the session that I had. So in this case, I'm getting the UAC warning, can click through that and continue forward. Now that's going to depend highly on which user you log into the remote desktop session as and whether or not they have the ability to go through UAC or not. But absolutely, you can do it if you log in as an administrative user with those privileges. That's fine, and we'll say OK. So it's actually going to end the Windows Explorer while it finishes the update process for Nextcloud, and then it'll bring it back up because it uses Windows Explorer as part of its plugins. But as you can see, Guacamole works really well. Now I'm using this all through an IP address, and what I want to do is I want to be able to access this securely across the internet, so I can still access these different devices that I have capability access here on my local area network, and I want to be able to do that very easily. So we're going to go set this up with an actual domain name next, and yeah, everything looks good. It's going to say, hey, you can't do anything unless you reboot this machine. So for now, I'm not going to say reboot it, but we know we need to. So I'm just going to close this window, and we actually want to go set up a domain name. So we're going to do that right now. To create a reverse proxy, we want to have a fully qualified domain name. So I own the domain routemehome.org. So that's the one that I'm going to be using today. And I have an A record already set up with my domain provider so that I can have requests sent directly to my public IP address. At the firewall, when it hits the firewall, my firewall says, oh, that's a request on port 80 or port 443. I'm going to forward that through to the box that runs Nginx Proxy Manager. Nginx Proxy Manager is going to see the request and say, do I have that in my list? And if it doesn't, it's going to give you a generic page. But if it does, it's going to send you on to that server. So Nginx Proxy Manager kind of handles running the web traffic around my network. So I'm going to call this guac.routemehome.org. Make sure I spelled it correctly. I'm going to hit tab so it turns into this little chip like this. And then I'm going to put in the IP address of the server that I used. So I want to say something about this IP address. If you are running the Guacamole install on the same machine or the same Docker host where you're running Nginx Proxy Manager, you have a couple of ways that you can actually set this up. First, you could use localhost here instead of the IP address of the server. So in my case, I have Nginx Proxy Manager running on a completely different server on my network than where I'm running Guacamole. So I have to use the IP address of that server. Again, if they were both running on the same network, on the same server and on the same Docker network, that is not the default network. You have to create a separate Docker network. But if you had Nginx Proxy Manager and Guacamole running on the same network, instead of this or an IP address, you could also put in the container name. So the container name in this case is Guacamole 1. That's the container name you could use here. And then again, just give it the internal port number that it runs on, which is 8080, and this would function just right and no problem. So you've got a few ways you can do that, but because I have this running on 2 different servers, I use the IP address, and then I'm going to put in the port number. Oops. That's the port number that we set up on the left side of our port mapping. I'm going to tell it to block common exploits, WebSocket support, and then I'm going to jump over here to the SSL tab. I'm going to tell it request a new certificate, force SSL, HTTP2 support, HSTS on both of these. Make sure my email is filled in correctly, and then I want to accept the terms of service for Let's Encrypt. I'm going to hit save. This is going to go out to Let's Encrypt and say, hey, try to reach the address that I gave you, walk.routemehome.org, on port 80. And if you can, give me a new certificate and make it use that certificate. And then if that pop-up just goes away like it did just then, you're going to have a new entry like this right here, and you'll see that it says Let's Encrypt, public, and online. And when you click it, it should take you to your Guacamole install. So there we go. We're on the install. I'm going to close the one with the IP address here, and we've got this one now. So that's all there is to setting up a reverse proxy. It's a little bit of setup to start with, where you need to go and register a domain, set up an A record to point that domain name to whatever public IP address you need for your server. And you can set up lots of A records. You can set up CNAME records, which just point to another A record. So really useful. I've talked about these things in the past. But yeah, you need a record that points to that public IP address. And once you've got that, really you're just handling things, on that server or on that network locally. So we've still got our Windows 10 machine that we can log into, which is awesome. And we're ready to go from the perspective of a reverse proxy. Now the next thing I want to do is, while this is great to have the login stuff that Guacamole has, so I could log out and log back in using username and password, the person who made this particular container, this particular image, also included the ability to add the Guacamole extensions, which give you a lot of other capabilities. So going out and reading about those extensions and what things you need is important. But for me, I did a video on Authentik a couple of weeks back. Now I want to use my Authentik instance to create an OIDC, or OpenID Connect, username and password, and have that linked up to a user inside of my Guacamole instance. So we're going to go through that next. If we're going to set up any kind of authentication system, the first thing you need to do is add the extension to the container. The next thing you need to do is go into the properties inside of this setup to make sure that everything is set there. If you want to see those things, you can go out to the Guacamole Apache, or the Apache Guacamole information site, and it'll give you all of the extensions, and then you can click on each extension and see what kind of things are required. So in this case, I'm going to do OpenID Connect, so we're going to add that one. So I'm going to do nano docker compose.yaml, because first we need to add the section for the actual extension. So I'm just going to go right here. I'm going to space out properly. Remember, YAML is space dependent. I'm going to put environment, and then I'm going to go out 2 more spaces there, put a hyphen, and I need to add the environment variable, and this is extensions, and that's equals auth-sso-openid. So we want to have it set up just like that. We can save this with Control O, press enter to confirm, and then exit with Control X. And then we're going to go and we need to adjust the properties. So we're going to do nano, or actually we need to do sudo, because this is getting run in the background under a different person. Sudo nano, and then it's under the Postgres folder that we mapped. It's going to be under Guacamole folder, and then guacamole.properties, just like that. We're going to hit this, and we're going to go down below this LDAP section. Now, if you're wanting to set up LDAP, they've given you a good example here. You'll just go through and uncomment this by removing this hyphen, this hashtag. So just go through and remove the hashtag, and then fill out the correct values there. But we're not going to set up YAML. We're going to set up OpenID Connect. So I'm going to make a couple of spaces below that. So I'm going to grab this right here, copy it, and I'm going to paste it right here for you. So you can see I've got a bunch of just filled in stuff that we need to go through and fix and change. So we're going to go and get those values, but we need to go set up our Authentik instance in this case to do that. If you're using Keycloak, you can do the same thing. If you're using Citadel or any other authentication providers that you might run on your own, you can do this. If you're using like Google OAuth or something, you probably get this information for them as well. You know, Facebook, Twitter, whoever offers it, I don't really know, but I want to run my own. I want to have control over my data. I don't really trust all these other people with my data anymore because they've just proven over and over that you can't trust them. So we're just gonna, and this one I can change pretty quickly because this one actually does need to be like the URL. So route me home. There we go. The admins group is correct and this OpenID is correct already. So we just need to fill in these 4 up here above that. So we'll go over to our Authentik install and we'll do that. And here you can see I've already got several applications. I've even got my production Guacamole set up. But I'm going to go up here to the administration. And the first thing I need to do over here is create a new provider. So I'm going to go to applications and providers. I'm just going to say create. This is going to be an OpenID Connect. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger for you guys. It makes it a little bit hard to do it on the screen, but it's fine because I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. So this is the OAuth OpenID provider. We're going to click on next. And then on this name section, we're going to call this something we can identify pretty easily. So walk test OAuth. And then under the authentication flow, I'm going to pick this first flow, to welcome to open source advocate, because that's the one that I created and kind of modified. And then here I'm going to pick the explicit consent. And then down below that, I'm going to leave it as confidential. And then it gives me my client ID and client secret already. I think we only need the client ID for the Guacamole setup, which is pretty great. And then the redirect URIs and origins, I'm going to put https://guac.routemehome.org. So it's entered right there. And I think that's everything we're going to need here. If you ever have to change things, you can come into this advanced section, but you want to know what you're doing for sure when you make changes. So in this case, it's based on the user's hashed ID. I don't think I need to change that for now. And you've got some other options that you can get in different places, but I think this should be good. So we're going to go ahead and just close up. We're going to grab this. No, we're going to grab the ID because we need that. So let's go fill in the ID back here in the terminal. And the client ID is right here. So I'm just going to paste it in. And don't worry, I'm going to destroy this after the video. So nothing for you guys to worry about that you see my keys or anything like that. So we need the issuer, the JWKS endpoint, and the authorization endpoint. So let's go back over here. We're going to finish this. We're just going to click on finish. That's good. So now we've got our provider, and I'm going to bring this back down just to get to my side panel here. I'm going to go to applications because my provider doesn't have an application assigned to it yet. So I need to create a new one. So I'm going to create, and I'm going to call this walk test, and then OAuth. Or OIDC is probably fine. And you see it creates the slug for me. The group I don't need to worry about. The provider, I want to grab that walk test that I just created. So I'm going to click on that one. Back channel providers, again, nothing to do there. Nothing else really to do here. The one thing that you might want to do if you're using this is go out and find your Guacamole icon. And you would just do that here. You just click on browse. And you can go to like pictures, I think is where I have this maybe, and then you just kind of scroll through your different options. There it is right there. So I can pick that, and by picking it, it's going to put that icon on the application page like you saw with the other ones. I'm going to click create. So now I've got my application, and if I go back to my providers, if I look at that walk test, it's got the little check mark that says, okay, I see the application that you want me to be using for this. So we've done pretty well, and now we need to click on this right here for the provider. That's going to get us those URLs. So here's the configuration URL. Here's the configuration issuer. So I'm going to grab the issuer because it said we needed that one. And I'm going to do a copy. We'll go back in here, and we're right in the right spot to paste that in. Great. We need the authorization. I think that was actually the next one. So let's go get that one. Let's see, I don't need that extra space. Let's go grab the authorization URL. And then we'll paste it in. And then we need the JWKS URL, which I think is just a few down here. Yeah, right here. So I'm going to scroll that up a little bit. It's the last one on the list for me. I'm going to click copy, and again I'm going to paste that in, and I'm going to save all of this with Control O and then enter. One thing I want to talk about is this down here where it says the extension priority. So if you have multiple extensions installed, it wants to know like in what order should it try to perform these extensions in case they clash with each other. So since I've only got one, it's fine to put OpenID. But if you wanted to change this back so it would give you the regular Guacamole login prompt, you could put star and a comma. Okay, and that would tell it, hey, first do the regular login prompt, then try the OpenID prompt if they want to. It's not like it gives you both on the screen, but OpenID is fine for now. So again, I'm going to save this just to make sure, press enter to confirm, and then Control X to exit. And before we restart our Docker container, we need to go back into the Guacamole instance, and we need to do something that's going to map our users together, or give us a user that will work with our OIDC and let us be an admin in the system, or whatever level user group you want a person to have. You'd want to go ahead and create that user. Otherwise, it's going to create them, and they're not going to have access to anything, and they're not going to be in any roles or anything like that. So I'm going to go in here real quick, and I'm going to go over to settings. So up here in the upper right, click on your user and then click on settings. So now that we're here in the users, we're going to create a new user. And right here, we're going to put in the user's email address. I'm using my Chromium browser. I apologize for the white brightness, but it kept trying to fill in the password field for me automatically when I'd come to this page from Firefox because of the tools I'm using. And once you dirty this field, it thinks that you want to have a password, and it will not let you save with blank passwords. So you need to make sure not to click in these fields. Don't tab to these fields, or it's going to keep giving you that error. So make sure just that it stays empty. I'm going to put in my fixitdelrio.com email address. I just want to make sure everything's correct there, and then I'll put in my name and my email here as well, and fixitdelrio and admin. And I'm going to come down, I'm going to check all the boxes here so that this user will be an admin user as well, and I'm going to give them access to my Win10. If you have groups, you can also go in and check the group if you want to. I'm going to click save, and now you can see I've got that user saved. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to log out, and I'm going to just kind of get rid of this re-login thing. And we'll go to that here in just a second, but first we want to go back and we want to set this up so that we have everything set. So I'm going to do a Docker compose restart. That's going to restart our application. We've already set up our OpenID Connect, we've set up our user, everything like that, and we're going to go and attempt to log in here. So we'll just go up here and hit enter. And we're going to get redirected to our OpenID Connect. So I'll put in my fixitdelrio.com user, and I'll go grab my password from my password manager here, and my one-time PIN, and we'll get logged in. And now you see that I've got access to that machine we've already set up, and if I go over and I click on settings, you'll see I've got all of the settings. So if you ever only have a couple of settings up here when you go in and you don't see the machines that you mapped to yourself, you'll know that you didn't get mapped to that admin you created. But you should have access to this, and you can see both users. If you don't want to have this generic user here anymore, you can go in and remove them. Since you're not allowing people to log in that way, I would say leave it as it is, just in case you need to use this person to go back and access something later. But definitely have a very long, strong password there. But there's my user that we just created that we're logged in as. And again, we can see our connections, and we could go add other connections. And if we just want to prove that we can actually log into that connection, we can click on it here. And there we go. We are logged in and we are ready to run. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you did, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along on the open source journey with us, and I'll talk to you next time. It's your open source advocate, and I'm back, and I've set up a store with a little bit of merchandise. I love being your open source advocate, but I want you guys to be the open source advocates with me. So if you want to, get out there and get some of this stuff. And if you do, let me know what you think of it. Thank you for subscribing.